Hey viewers, welcome to part 2 of Break Your Macros Down into Steps. If you haven't seen part 1, please do so as I will be continuing on from there. Now in part 1, we didn't do any coding. I just talked about breaking down user requirements into individual functional units of work, which we then present to the user as a list of steps, such as in a table like this. Now some of these will be performed manually by the user, while others will be automated by macro. In today's video, we're going to look at some of the code behind the go to and run buttons. So where do we start? Well, I like to ease into a project, so I would start from the very top and try and identify any worksheets that we're going to need in these steps and just create them. They'll just be blank to start with, but it's a good starting point. So I'll need one called static data. I'll need a customer data, sales data, detail report, and a summary report. So just create all those worksheets and you can build this out as you go along. Right, now we can get started on some VBA, and I'll begin with the simple ones, and that's the go-tos. They essentially select the underlying worksheet. So Alt F11 to get to the macro editor. I have a subroutine called go to static, and the first thing I do is ensure that the worksheet is visible. In my experience, users tend to hide worksheets which contain underlying source data or static data. If you try and select it before making it visible, you'll get an error. Now, if you're wondering what this is, it's the code name that I've assigned to the static data worksheet. So instead of typing in worksheets, then the sheet name, I can just use that code name throughout my code. And there are advantages of doing that over the standard way. If you're not familiar with it, please check out my how to reference worksheets as I go into detail there, including the advantages of using code name. But I'll just show you quickly how you can create this. In fact, each sheet has a default code name. So sheet 1 has a code name of sheet 1 and sheet 2 has sheet 2. But I like to change them to make them more meaningful. And you can do that by coming over to this properties window on the left here. If you don't have it, click on view, then properties, window here, or F4, and it'll give you this window. Then you select the worksheet. Come in here, then in the name, we're going to give it a different name. So this originally would have been perhaps sheet 3. So I use WS for worksheet and then some name. If you've got a long name, you could always use an acronym. And I do that with all the sheets that I'm going to be referencing in my macros. From then on, I can use WS static throughout my code. So just like I've created this subroutine, I create a go-to for the detail report, for the summary, and even the steps. That way they can click a button to take them back to the steps worksheet. Now just don't forget to change these two here to the code name for the particular worksheet, or if you're not using the code name, then worksheets and then detailed summary or whatever you're using. So I'm just going to hide these worksheets. So I'm going to go to the static data. Click on go to. It's now visible, and I do have some data here. I use this for the drop downs in the steps worksheet for the reporting period. I've added a go to steps button so you can take them back to here. Now it looks a bit sort of lazy doing that, but when users have lots and lots of worksheets, it's actually a quite a nice touch. So again, I could go to the detail report. I've got nothing here really, and go back, summary report and go back. It's pretty easy. So now I've done that and the other go-tos. Now for the run steps, I'm not actually going to show you how to import source data or generate the detailed report or summary report. What I'm going to do is create a template subroutine that I use for all of my run steps here. And in those, I will show you how I validate inputs, and in this case, use the reporting period to check that a prerequisite step has been run. I'll also show you how to update this last run for the particular step that you've clicked on. Now, I already have the template for import customer data, so let's go and take a look at it. Got some variables defined, and then the next thing is the error handler. Now, I have a separate video on error handling, so please check that out. I'm not going to go into too much detail here. Essentially, this is saying whenever there is a runtime error, jump down to this label, and that is at the very end of the subroutine. And what it'll do whenever there's an error, it'll build the error message, set the icon and the buttons that will be shown in the message box, and then jumps back up to this label where it will re-enable some settings. I'll talk about that in a second, and display that error message, and then it'll exit. Let's go back up to the top. So the next thing after setting the error handler, we disable certain settings. And again, I have another video where I talk about a handful of settings that I like to disable at the beginning of the macro and then re-enable them at the very end. So please check that video out. I'll give you a quick look. So here is disable settings true. So I want to disable them. Come into here. If we are disabling them, there's these four: turn off calculations, disable display alerts, screen updating, enable events. If disable settings false, then it will re-enable them here. I won't go into detail as I talk about each one of these in that video. All right, back to here. So the next thing I want to do is just confirm with the user that they in fact wanted to run this step. They may have clicked on the wrong button. So we define a message. This will import customer data. Do you wish to continue? And then we're going to prompt them with a message box. That message, this is the question mark, icon, and a yes/no button. And if they click no, then we're going to set process aborted message. The icon that we're going to display is information and OK only button. And then jump down to this label, the exit one, not the error one. All right, so this one comes down to here, re-enables the settings and displays that message, which was process aborted, and then we exit. So this will run whenever the code is successful and also on a runtime error. So this is a catch-all, always runs, and it's a good place for putting things like closing workbooks or database connections, because it will always run regardless of success or failure. Click the button and we get the prompt. Just zoom in a little. This will import customer data. Do you wish to continue? And we've got the question mark, yes, no buttons, click no, information icon, process aborted, and OK button. All right. So once the user confirms they want to continue, the next step is to validate inputs. Now I do have a separate video on how to validate inputs where I go into detail, so please check that out if you haven't already, but I'll give you a quick rundown. Now because I've already defined the function, if I click anywhere inside it, hold Shift, press F2, it'll take me to it. As with the import customer data, I like to start by setting the error handler, then initialize some variables. And then I'm going to validate the first input, and that is the reporting month. So I set this range variable that I defined up here to the reporting month. Now, rather than hard coding the cell address, which is E6, so let's go back to here. So E6, I like to use a constant. And the reason being, if we were to insert a row, for example, it is now E7, and I'd have to go and change the code. So if I hold Shift and press F2, it's public const, so it's a constant. There's the name as string, and then this named range, steps month. So in this cell here, what I've done is given it a named range. So if you come to the top left here, where you would normally see the cell address, I've given it a name and I've called it steps_month. So steps because it's on the steps worksheet. Now, if you're on another worksheet, if it has a long name, you could use an acronym, whatever naming convention you want to use. And I've done the same with the year as well. So steps_year. The beauty with these is if I were to insert a row or delete it or even a column, it moves with it. So as you can see, it's still called steps month, and that is still steps year. And that way I don't have to go and change my code. Now, I do have another video where I talk about how to reference ranges, and I go into more detail about not hard coding cell or address references within your main code. So please check that out. So this is the code name for the steps worksheet, range, and we use the constant which points to the named range. So this variable is now pointing to this cell here, and just checking. The validation is pretty simple. I'm just checking that it's not blank. You might have other conditions that you want to check. Okay, if it is null, then this variable here is set to true. I set the message to please select reporting month and then go to the exit label, not the error, to the exit. Right. And I'll do the same with the year. So if it passed validation, it then goes on to the year. So we point this variable to the year. And similar thing, if it's null, so it's got no value in it, it sets it to true, and that is the message it's going to show and jumps down to here. Now I'm only validating one at a time. As soon as one is invalid, it will exit the function. So let's assume the month was blank. It jumps down to this exit here. So if there was a validation error, set focus to whichever cell we were pointing to, and then return true to validate inputs. Now, this will only return false if there was a runtime error. If the validation is successful or not successful, I still return true because it's done what it has to do without failing. The difference will be that there'll be either no validation error or a validation error. Okay. If there's a runtime error, however, it'll jump down to here and validate inputs will be false. Okay. And then we'll set the error message, come back to here and jump up to the exit. There will be no validation error. It will be a runtime error. So it won't do any of this and it'll just exit. And I'll explain that a bit here. So if validate input, so if there was a runtime error, it will return false. So it's going to jump down to the error handler and display that error message that we set in the validate inputs. Now, if there was a validation error or successful, no validation errors, then that will return true. So what we're going to check next is, was there a validation error? If it was, then set the icon to an exclamation or whatever you like, and we just want to show the OK button, and then jump down to the exit. And the exit is going to display the validation error message that we set in the validate inputs. If there was no validation error and no runtime error, it's going to skip this part and keep going with our code. But before I do that, let me just show you the validation. So let's clear the reporting period and I'll set focus to a different cell. I'll click run and say yes to continue this time. All right. And now you'll see that I get, please select reporting month. I'll click OK. And as you can see, it's set focus here for the user. So they know which one you're talking about, even though the message was pretty self-explanatory. I'll do the same with the year. I'll click over here. All right. Import customer details. Yes. Please select reporting year. Okay. And it's set focus to it. So now that validation has passed, the next thing we're going to do is get the month and year again using the same code that we used before and just store them in these variables here. Also, just make sure that the customer data sheet is visible just in case it was hidden. Then here we'll be ready to open the source file, perhaps filter on the selected period, and then import the data. So once that's done, what I like to do is store the selected period on the actual worksheet itself. Okay, so that's what I'm doing here. So customer data, that's the code name, range. Again, I don't hard code the cell address. I'm using a constant, the public constant, NR for name range, underscore CD for customer data, underscore period. Now you can use whatever naming convention you want, but try and keep it consistent. As string equal to, and this is the name that I'm going to give to the cell, and I'll show you that in Excel. So let's go to here, and I'll just unhide the customer data. So I'm going to store the selected period here. And if you have a look up the top, you can see that I've given this cell the named range CD underscore period. Rather than hard code the cell, we use the named range, set its value to the selected month, space, selected year. So I'm going to run. Yes, you can see it's updated the last run, but we'll come back to that in a moment. We go to customer data. You can see that we've set the selected period. Now I just want to clear it for the purposes of the next step. And I'll clear this as well. All right, so next I'm going to show you how I update the last run. And I do that in 2 steps. First, I need to find the table row for the clicked button. Then I will update the last run within that table row. So I have a function called selected table row. As you can see, it returns an integer, and that integer will be the table row, not the Excel row. So first we get a reference to the actual table, and this variable TBL is defined as a list object, and because it's an object we have to use set. So set TBL equal, the table is on the steps worksheet, dot list objects, and then a constant which has the table name. And here is that constant. And the table name I've given is TBL steps. So you can find your table name, click anywhere inside the table, then go up to the menu, click on table design, and the table name is here. So whatever you call it, that's what you want to set the constant to. Now, how do we find which row was clicked? Well, first we're going to get the button's name or ID that was clicked. And we do that by doing this application.caller. and I'm going to store the name in a string called btn ID. I'll quickly show you in Excel. If I right click on this button, each button has a name, button 16, 15, and so on. All right, so we're going to get that name. Now, once we got that name, we can get the top left cell of that button. Once we know the top left cell, we can get the row of that cell. All right, I'll explain that a bit more. So currently, this import customer data, this run button, its top left cell is D7. So the row of that cell is row 7. If this button were to be here, the top left cell would be C7 and the row would be 7. If this button were here, the top left cell would be C6 and so the row would be 6. All right, so that's how we get the corresponding row to the clicked button. And I'll show you how that works in the code. So we got the caller, the name of the button, all right? And then to get the Excel row, we go step sheet, shapes, and then using the name of the button, this gives us the actual button. Then top left cell, and then the row of that top left cell. And that gives us the Excel row as I showed you before. So it gives us this row here, row 7, not the table row. To get the table row, we go the Excel row minus the table's header row range row. So the row of the header, basically. So there's the header, and the row number is 3. So 7 minus 3 is 4. So the table row number is 4. So once we have the row, we'll return it back. Let's go back to the import customer data. So now that I have the table row, I'm going to update the last run for that row and also append the selected period. Let's go to the update last run. All right. So last run is a string. I'm going to format the date time now using this constant. You can use any date format you like. Then if we pass through the selected period, because I've made it an optional parameter, if you don't pass through a value, it'll use null string. So if it was passed through, it's going to append that to the date. All right. Again, get the table, WS steps, list objects using that same constant that I mentioned earlier. Once we have the table, we can get the actual table row. So table, list rows, and the table number that we found in the previous function. Okay. And this cell row is a list row type. So what this is giving us is this actual row. So if I click on this button, it's giving me this row within the table. All right. And we want the last run column of it. So it's the 6th column in that particular row here, not counting column A because that's not part of the table. All right. So how do we set that value? We go selected row, range, cells. There's only one row, so 1, comma, and this is the column within that row that I mentioned. So you could just hard code a 6 because it's the 6th column within that row. But again, if we inserted a column or deleted, then you'd have to come and change your code here. So what I do instead is go table.list columns. This is a constant with the table's column name, and I'll show you that in a second. And then once we get the column, we do a dot index to get the number. This will essentially give you 6. Right? And then we set its value to the last run. Now I'll show you that constant. So it's going to look for a column called last run. Now, obviously, if someone came here and changed this to last run date, then that's not going to work, but we're kind of stuck. You can either use the column index or the name. But again, if you're going to use the column index, I would do this, all right, and hard code the number here. So at least if it ever changes, you just come into one place and change it here. And then all you'd need to do is get rid of this bit and just put the constant here. All right, and that would do the same. All right, either way works. I prefer to use the column name. All right. So let me show you how it updates the last run. So click on run. Do you wish to continue? Yes. Successfully imported customer data. And here we go. We've got the date, time, period is November 25. So I can just change this to, let's go August, run. We've got August 25. All right. Again. So that's the last run. Customer data, and then at the very end, once it's successful, we set the message to successfully imported customer data, set the style to information and VB OK only is the button. It will fall through into this label, re-enable the settings and display the successful message. And now that we have the template, we can copy this and use it for the other run steps. We just need to change a few variables and some text to make it specific to the step that we're running. Of course, you'd also have to add the bulk of the processing, whatever's happening, importing the data, generating a report or whatever here. So let's go ahead and make a copy. Now I already have a import sales data, but we'll create another one just to show you how easy it is. I'll just leave a few rows here blank so I can see exactly which is the copy, as I have two import customer datas. All right, so double click on the copy, hold Control and press H. Here we're going to do a replace. Now I'll just zoom in, and what we're going to do is in the replace with, I'm going to put import sales data. Now, because I already have one, I'm just going to call it 2. The important thing is to make sure you select current procedure. So it only replaces within this copy. Then click replace all. All right. The next thing is to find any variables that are specific to the customer data and replace them with sales data. So Control F, I want to look for cust. Again, within current procedure. So I've got some text, which I'm going to change to sales. The worksheet code name, I'm going to call sales as well. F3 again, sales. F3 again, that's some text. I'll just change that. F3 again, and that's the error message. All right, done. There's no more words that say customer or cust. They now say sales. Finally, one thing I want to replace is any named ranges specific to customer data. So search for NR underscore, again within the current procedure. So search for NR underscore. So find, I've got NR steps, that one's okay because that's got nothing to do with customer data. F3, that's the year, skip that one, F3 again. Now here we've got a named range for the customer data period. I want to change this to sales data. Now I've already defined this constant. Go Shift F2. You could just copy the customer data one, paste it in here, change the name to SD period and change the actual named range that you're going to use, SD period. Now I already have that. If I have a look at my sales data in that cell here, there's my named range, SD underscore period. So when I run import sales data, the selected period will be added here, just like it was with the customer data. All right, so now there are all the changes that you need to make for the template, just to create a copy of it specific for import sales data. I'm going to run it and it should behave exactly the same, except it's going to say sales data. I just need to reassign the macro to the new import sales data, number 2. I click run. So it says, this will import sales data. Do you wish to continue? Yes. All right. So successfully imported sales data. Okay, good. And it's updated the period here as well. And if we go to sales data, there you go, it's inserted it. The validation should work as well. Let's get rid of the year. I'll click import sales data. Do you wish to continue? Yes. And please select reporting period. You can see it's set focus there again. All right. Let me reassign this back to the original because I just want to show you one more check that I do. And that is to use the selected reporting period to check that a prerequisite step has been run. So in this case, I want to make sure that whenever I run import sales data, it's been run for the same period as the customer data import, right? So first of all, let me just go and clear these for now. All right. Now let me go to my sales data that I had created before. So this is exactly the same as the one that we just made now, the copy, except I've just got this extra code in here. All right. It looks like a lot, but there's 2 different conditions that I want to show you. So the first thing I want to do is check that customer data import has actually run. So this is within the import sales data. So this is a string, CD period, defined as a string up the top. Customer data range, and we're getting the customer data period that we stored in that worksheet. Okay, and then it's just checking if it's null. So if it hasn't been run at all, the message is going to be customer data has not been imported. Please run that step first, exclamation mark, OK button, and go to the exit. All right, that's all this check is doing. Now I'll go back to Excel. Because I cleared that, we should see that message. So if I run import customer data, sorry, if I run the import sales data, it's going to give me that message. So yes to that. And here we get customer data has not been imported. Please run that step first. All right. So if I run this, we now have the last run, but more importantly, that has been set. All right. So if I were to run this now, it will continue. So I'll just show you that. There you go. It didn't complain this time because we have run the customer data. But what if we had run import customer data for November, but then try to run sales data for December? So we can check that too if you want. It all depends on your requirements. So after this check here, we're going to reformat the period and comparing the selected period to the selected period that was stored when the customer data was imported. And if they don't match, we're going to say the selected period, and I'm putting that period in brackets, does not match the customer data, and then import period and the customer data period. All right. Now we can do 2 things. This one is going to force you to make sure that they are the same. So you can't run two different periods, right? So it's just going to say, please ensure you select the correct period or import the customer data for, again, the selected period. So we actually put in the period. And then exclamation and OK, and then it'll exit. If I run import sales data with December, customer data was November, it's going to spit that out. Let's have a quick closer look. The selected period, December 25, does not match the customer data import period, November 25. Please ensure you select the correct period or import customer data for December 25. Right? So we can choose, or the user can choose, well, actually it should have been November, or perhaps I need to import the customer data. So let me do that. If I run that, so customer data is now December, it should let me run the sales data, and it does. Right? That's good. The alternative thing you can do is, rather than force them to be the same, you could just ask them to confirm. Are you sure? You can continue anyway. They can be different. It's up to you. So it depends on what you need to do with your validation, what your requirements are. All right. And that would be, I guess, up to the user to decide. So in that case, we don't need this bit of code. We're going to say, do you wish to continue anyway? And then we give them the choice, the question with a yes, no button. If they say no, then we're going to abort and then exit. If they say yes, it's going to continue and do exactly the same as what it did before. So what I'm going to do is change this to, let's change this to, all right, let's go to September. Something silly. It's not going to match the customer data import. If I run this, do you wish to continue? This time, it's going to say, selected period September 25 does not match customer data import period December 25. Do you wish to continue anyway? Yes or no? Let's say no, it will abort the process. Say yes, it will run it. And there you go, successful. All right, and the sales data is imported for September 25. Now, obviously, you wouldn't want to do that, but you've got the choice there anyway. So that pretty much wraps it up. It was a bit of a long video. I hope you found this useful. If you did, please hit the like button. Don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on future videos. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments below. If you'd like to see a copy of this actual workbook, I'm happy to share it on Google Drive. Just let me know in the comments. Thanks again, and we'll see you on the next video.